This is what you call a solution. It's barely legible nonsense. Explain yourself if you can.
You know, there's a specific kind of silence that happens in a lecture hall when the air gets sucked out of the room. It's not peaceful. It's heavy. It's the sound of 50 people holding their breath because they know something ugly is about to go down. And that was the exact atmosphere in room 302 of Oakhaven University on a Tuesday morning in October. The man standing at the chalkboard was Professor Alistair Vance, a guy who wore three-piece suits like armor and looked at undergraduates the way you look at a smudge on your expensive Italian loafers. He'd been tenured for 25 years, drove a Porsche he parked in the dean's spot, and ran the advanced number theory department like it was his own private kingdom, where admission was a privilege he rarely granted. "Who let you in here?" Vance's voice cut through the hum of laptops opening, and every head turned. 50 pairs of eyes scanning the room until they landed on the back row, the corner seat near the radiator, where Marcus Thorne was just trying to pull his notebook out of his backpack. Marcus was 19, black, wearing a faded hoodie that had seen better days and sneakers that were held together by hope and super glue. He was the youngest student in the room by 2 years, a scholarship kid who worked nights loading trucks at the Amazon warehouse just to afford the textbooks Vance required. But nobody knew that all Vance saw was someone who didn't fit the aesthetic of his prestigious graveyard course, the class famous for destroying GPA letters and crushing dreams. "I'm talking to you." "Back row," Vance sneered, tapping the chalk against the slate with a rhythmic, annoying click. "Did you get lost looking for the financial aid office? Or did the janitorial staff start their shift early today?" A few students in the front row, the legacy kids, the ones whose dads played golf with the trustees, snickered, that nervous, cruel laughter that people used to signal they're on the bully's side. But Marcus didn't flinch. He just stood up slowly, his face a mask of calm that he'd perfected over years of being underestimated in rooms just like this one. "I'm enrolled in this course, Professor," Marcus said, his voice steady, low. "Check the roster this morning. I'm right there between Thompson and Underwood." Vance laughed, a short, sharp bark that echoed off the high ceilings. "Enrolled. Just because the computer system let you in doesn't mean you belong, son. This is advanced number theory, not remedial algebra. We deal with the architecture of the universe here, not whatever you're used to dealing with." He turned his back on Marcus then, dismissing him like he was nothing more than a fly, and started writing on the board, slashing the chalk with aggressive strokes, writing out a monstrous, sprawling equation that wrapped around the corners of the slate. A beast of a problem involving elliptic curves and modular forms that made the grad students in the front row squint in confusion. "This," Vance announced, dusting the chalk off his hands like he'd just performed a magic trick, "is the Callaway Vance conjecture, a little something I've been refining for a decade. PhD candidates have cracked their teeth on this and quit. Geniuses have cried over these variables." He turned back to the class, his eyes locking onto Marcus with a predatory gleam. "Since Mr. Thorne is so confident that he belongs in the sanctuary of intellect, perhaps he'd like to demonstrate his aptitude. Come down here, Mr. Thorne." The room went dead silent again, the kind of silence that hurts your ears, and Marcus could feel the weight of it, the expectation of failure, the "I told you so" already forming on Vance's lips. But Marcus walked down the aisle, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum, feeling the burn of 50 stares on his neck. "You have 5 minutes," Vance whispered as Marcus took the chalk, leaning in close so only Marcus could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. 5 minutes to prove you aren't just a diversity quota with a backpack, or you drop this class and get out of my sight forever." Marcus stood there, staring at the wall of white symbols on the black slate, and for a second, panic flared in his chest, hot and bright, because it looked like chaos. It looked like a foreign language written by a madman. But then he took a breath, the way his grandmother taught him, and he let his eyes unfocus just a little bit. And that's when the magic happened. That's when the chaos rearranged itself into patterns, into a rhythm, into music. See, what Vance didn't know, what nobody at Oakhaven knew, was that Marcus Thorne hadn't learned math in a prep school or a tutoring center. He'd learned it in the attic of a cramped apartment in South Chicago, poring over stacks of dusty, water-damaged notebooks he'd found in an old trunk when he was 12 years old. Notebooks filled with the frantic, brilliant scrawlings of a father he never knew, his dad. Elias Thorne had died when Marcus was a baby, a car accident. His mom said, a tragedy that she refused to talk about, but Elias had left behind these books. Pages and pages of proofs and theories that Marcus had absorbed like oxygen. Teaching himself calculus before he could drive. Understanding topology before he'd ever kissed a girl. As Marcus looked at Vance's impossible equation, a memory hit him like a physical blow. He'd seen this before. Not in a textbook, but in a yellowed, coffee-stained notebook from 1998, written in his father's distinctive, looping handwriting, with a note in the margin that simply said, "The bridge is symmetrical. Just flip the axis." Marcus didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate. He just remembered. He started writing, the chalk flying across the board, skipping the first 10 steps Vance expected and diving straight into the transformation, slashing through the complexity with a shortcut that was so elegant, so bizarre that it shouldn't have worked, but the numbers flowed like water, balancing perfectly, resolving into a simple, undeniable identity. Vance had given him 5 minutes. Marcus was done in 94 seconds. He put the chalk down, wiped his hands on his jeans, and turned to face the professor, whose face had drained of all color, leaving him looking like a wax statue of himself. "It balances," Marcus said quietly. "If you invert the modular form, the variables cancel out. It's not impossible, Professor, it's just backwards." The class was frozen, mouths hanging open, laptops forgotten, because even if they didn't understand the math, they understood the look on Vance's face. It wasn't just shock. It was terror, pure, unadulterated fear. That method, Vance stammered, his composure cracking like cheap glass. "Where did you? That's not in the curriculum. That's not in..." Marcus walked out of that lecture hall with his heart hammering against his ribs, knowing he had just started a war he wasn't sure he could win. But he couldn't shake the look in Vance's eyes when he mentioned his father. It wasn't confusion. It was guilt, deep and ancient. That afternoon, Marcus didn't go to the library. He drove for hours home to Chicago, ignoring the speed limits, needing to see his mother, needing to open that trunk again. When he burst into the small apartment, his mom, Sarah, was at the kitchen table, looking tired from her nursing shift, but she stood up when she saw his face. "Marcus, baby, what's wrong? Did you get expelled?" "Mom, who was Dad really?" Marcus asked, breathless, dumping his backpack on the floor. "I mean, really, because I just solved a math problem at school, a problem the professor said was impossible, and I used Dad's notes, and the professor, he looked like he'd seen a ghost." Sarah's face fell. She sat down heavily, looking 20 years older in a single second. "What was the professor's name?" "Vance," Marcus said. "Alistair Vance." Sarah let out a sound that was half sob, half scream, covering her mouth with her hand. "He's still there? After all this time, he's still there?" "Mom, what happened?" "Your father didn't die in a car accident, Marcus," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I lied to protect you. I lied because the truth was too ugly, too heavy for a boy to carry." She walked to the closet, pulled down the old trunk, and dug past the notebooks Marcus knew, pulling out a false bottom he'd never seen before, revealing a stack of legal documents and a letter dated November 1999. "Your father was a genius. Marcus, a true prodigy. He was a doctoral student at Oak Haven. The brightest star they'd ever seen," she said, handing him the letter. "And Alistair Vance was his advisor." Marcus read the letter, his hands shaking. It was a formal expulsion notice, citing gross plagiarism and academic fraud, signed by Alistair Vance, claiming that Elias Thorne had stolen research from the department chair. "Vance stole it," Sarah said, her voice hardening into steel. "Your father solved the grand unification of those theories. He worked on it for 3 years, filled those notebooks, and when he showed it to Vance, Vance told him it was worthless, told him to start over. And then 6 months later, Vance published it under his own name." "And Dad?" Marcus asked, though he was starting to dread the answer. "Dad fought," she said. "He filed complaints. He went to the dean. He tried to show them the notebooks, but it was 1999. Marcus, and it was a word of a young black man against a legacy professor with tenure. They crushed him, they expelled him, they blacklisted him so he couldn't get into any other program. She looked Marcus in the eye. He didn't crash his car, baby, he drove it off the bridge because he said his mind was the only thing he owned. And they took it, they erased him. Marcus felt the room spin. The rage boiling up from his gut, hot and molten. Vance hadn't just been mean in class. He hadn't just been a racist jerk. He was a murderer. A thief who had built a 25-year career on the bones of Marcus's father. He accused me of cheating today, Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. He's trying to do it again, Mom. He's trying to erase me too. Sarah grabbed his shoulders. Then you leave, Marcus. You drop out, you come home. We figure something else out. Do not let that man destroy you like he destroyed Elias. No, Marcus said, picking up the notebook, the one with the proof. The one dated a full year before Vance's famous paper. Dad ran because he thought he was alone. I'm not alone. I have you. I have the proof. And I have something Dad didn't have. What's that? I know Vance is afraid, Marcus said, closing the trunk. And I'm going to make him terrified. Marcus drove back to Oak Haven through the night, the plan forming in his head. Cold and precise, he wasn't going to the disciplinary hearing to defend himself. He was going to turn it into a crime scene investigation. He needed an ally, someone on the inside who hated Vance almost as much as he did. And he knew exactly who: Dr. Eleanor Rosales, the only other professor in the department who dared to challenge Vance in faculty meetings. A woman known for being brilliant but marginalized, perpetually passed over for department chair. He waited outside her office at 6 a.m., clutching the box of evidence. When she arrived, coffee in hand, looking startled to see a student camping in the hallway, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. Professor Rosales, Marcus said, standing up. My name is Marcus Thorne. My father was Elias Thorne, and I can prove that Alistair Vance has been a fraud for 25 years. Dr. Rosales stopped, her key hovering over the lock, her face going pale. Elias, she whispered, looking around the empty hallway as if the name itself was dangerous. You're Elias's son? You knew him? I was a grad student with him, she said, ushering him inside and locking the door quickly. He was the best of us. We all knew Vance stole that work, but nobody could prove it. The notebooks disappeared. They didn't disappear, Marcus said, placing the box on her desk. They went into an attic, and now they're back. Rosales opened the first notebook, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting, the equations that predated Vance's publication, and she gasped, her hand covering her mouth. This changes everything, Marcus. But you have to understand, going against Vance isn't just an academic dispute, it's war. The university will protect him to save their own reputation. They'll try to bury you. Let them try, Marcus said. Vance challenged me to solve a problem. Now I'm challenging him. The disciplinary hearing was set for 2 days later. Vance had expedited it, wanting Marcus gone before the whispers about the 94-second solve spread too far. But Vance made a mistake. He thought he was summoning a scared kid to a slaughter. He didn't know he was inviting a ghost to a reckoning. The disciplinary hearing was held in the Board of Trustees conference room, a space designed to intimidate, with oil paintings of dead white men staring down from the walls and a mahogany table, long enough to land a plane on. Vance sat at the head of the table, looking smug, flanked by the dean of students and the university's legal counsel, while Marcus sat at the other end, alone, his backpack by his feet. Or at least, Vance thought Marcus was alone. Mr. Thorne, the dean began, adjusting his glasses, you are charged with severe academic misconduct. Professor Vance asserts that the solution you presented in class, a solution to a problem deemed unsolvable by standard methods, could only have been obtained through illicit means. We are here to formalize your expulsion. Vance smirked, leaning back in his leather chair, twirling a pen. It's a pity, really. Some students just aren't cut out for the rigor of this institution. If you sign the withdrawal papers now, son, we won't put the fraud stamp on your transcript. You can go. I don't know, learn a trade. Marcus didn't touch the papers. He looked at Vance, really looked at him, seeing the smallness of the man, the fear hiding behind the arrogance. "I didn't cheat," Marcus said, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. "And I'm not withdrawing. I'm requesting an independent academic review. Per University Bylaw 7.4, if a student disputes a plagiarism charge regarding original work, they have the right to demonstrate their competence before a panel of 3 external experts." Vance froze. The dean frowned. "That bylaw hasn't been invoked in 30 years, Mr. Thorne. It's for doctoral candidates defending a thesis, not for undergraduates." Marcus interrupted. "The bylaw says any student, unless you want to admit on record that the rules are different for me." The lawyer leaned over and whispered to the dean. The dean sighed. "Fine, but be aware, Mr. Thorne, if you fail this review, the expulsion is immediate and permanent. We will bring in 3 mathematicians from neighboring universities. They will set problems. You will solve them, live, no notes, no internet." "I accept," Marcus said. "On one condition. The review happens tomorrow, publicly, in the main lecture hall." Vance laughed, a nervous sound. "A spectacle? You want to be humiliated in front of an audience? If I'm a fraud, what do you have to lose?" Marcus countered. "Unless you're afraid of what I might write on that board." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Done. Tomorrow at noon. Prepare to pack your bags. Kid." The next 24 hours were a blur. Dr. Rosales worked the phones, calling in favors, reaching out to the old guard of mathematics people who cared more about the truth than university politics. She managed to secure 3 heavy hitters: Dr. Reese Formit, Dr. Chen from Stanford, and Dr. Sullivan, a retired legend who was known for eating grandstanding professors for breakfast. By noon the next day, the lecture hall was packed. Word had spread like wildfire that Janitor Kid was taking on the king. Students were sitting in the aisles, hanging off the rafters. Vance sat in the front row, arms crossed, looking bored, but his foot was tapping a mile a minute. The 3 panelists sat at a table on the stage. Marcus stood by the chalkboard, just a piece of chalk and his brain. "Mr. Thorne." Dr. Sullivan grumbled, looking over his spectacles. "We have prepared 3 problems. They are not textbook problems. They are unsolved or partially solved conjectures. We don't expect you to solve them completely, but we expect to see a level of attack that proves your genius. Begin." The first problem was a nightmare of topology. Marcus attacked it. He didn't just solve it. He dismantled it. He wrote with a fury, the chalk snapping twice, his mind entering that fugue state where the world fell away. He finished in 20 minutes. The crowd murmured. Vance shifted in his seat. The second problem was number theory ugly, messy stuff. Marcus used a shortcut from his dad's 1997 notebook. He finished in 30 minutes. Dr. Chen whispered to Dr. Reese. They were nodding. They looked impressed. "Final problem," Dr. Sullivan said. "This is a variation of the Callaway-Vance conjecture, the one you supposedly solved in class. Show us the derivation. Show us how you get there." This was it. The trap. Marcus started writing. He laid out the proof, step by step, the Vance method. But halfway through, he stopped. He turned to the audience. "This is where the current academic consensus says you have to use the Brubaker transformation," Marcus said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "That's what Professor Vance published in his seminal 1999 paper. But it's wrong. It's clumsy. It works, but it's like using a hammer to open a window." He erased the board. A gasp went through the room. What are you doing?" Vance shouted, standing up. "He's stalling. Stop this. Sit down, Alistair," Dr. Sullivan barked. "Let the boy work." "My father," Marcus continued, writing a new set of variables, "found a different way. He called it the Thorne inversion. He realized that if you treat the variable as a complex plane, the answer isn't linear. It's circular." Marcus wrote the final proofs, the ones from the hidden notebook. The logic was undeniable. It was cleaner, faster, more beautiful than anything Vance had ever published. It proved, mathematically, that the foundation of Vance's career was a clumsy copy of a superior mind. He drew the final box around the answer and dropped the chalk. Silence. Absolute. Stunned silence. Then, Dr. Sullivan stood up. He walked over to the board. He traced the lines with a shaking finger. He turned to Vance. Alistair, Sullivan said, his voice booming without a microphone. This is the proof you showed me in 1998. The one you said was lost when your grad student died. You told me you never solved it. Vance's face went gray. I refined it. I know, Marcus said, pulling the old, tattered notebook from his backpack. You didn't refine anything. You stole it. This notebook is dated October 1997, 2 years before your paper. It's all here. Every step, every mistake you made in your paper is a mistake my father fixed in the margins of this book. But you never saw the margins because you kicked him out before he could show you. Marcus walked to the edge of the stage, holding the notebook up like a holy relic. My father was Elias Thorne. He didn't drop out. You expelled him to steal his life. You drove him to that bridge. The room erupted. It wasn't applause. It was chaos. Students were filming, shouting. The dean was frantically trying to get to the stage. Dr. Rosales was standing in the wings, tears streaming down her face, nodding. Vance looked around, realizing the walls were closing in. This is a fabrication, a forgery. That notebook is fake. I've authenticated the ink and paper. Dr. Sullivan interrupted, his voice like a gavel strike. Before the session, Dr. Rosales brought me the evidence. We ran the tests. It's real, Alistair. It's over. Vance slumped into his chair, a man hollowed out by 25 years of imposter syndrome and guilt. He looked small. He looked pathetic. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The university, terrified of the PR nightmare and the lawsuits, fired Vance within 24 hours. They stripped his tenure, retracted his papers, and renamed the mathematics wing. The one Vance had arrogantly named after himself the Elias Thorne Center for Mathematics. Marcus didn't get expelled. In fact, he didn't even have to finish the semester. The board granted him full credit for the course and a full-ride fellowship for the rest of his degree. But the real moment of victory wasn't the hearing. It was a month later. Marcus was sitting in the newly dedicated study lounge of the math department, working on his own research. A freshman walked in, a young black girl, looking terrified, holding a textbook like a shield. She saw Marcus and froze. "Excuse me," she whispered. "Are you